Welcome in, everyone, to an episode of the Unemployed podcast with Mike Schaefer. It is a Building Blocks Thursday. That means Tim Verghese. That means we are going to have some building blocks discussions, some recruiting talk, some portal talk, all of that stuff. And it also means it's brought to us by our friends at Bubbles and Blocks Child Development Center. They have 3 convenient locations across the capital city, and they are well suited to handle your child care needs. The center boasts of strong curriculum for the children, helpful staff that will have your child's best interest at heart. And I've talked about this a few different times, and my son eats and eats and eats and eats. And I promise you, having had him in a couple different daycares now, the food was well received at Bubbles and Blocks Child Development Center. That should not be discounted. I know it's not what you're thinking about when you're sending your kid off. You're like, I need them to go somewhere they can be safe. I need them to go somewhere where they can learn. I need them to go somewhere where I trust the people to help them. You also want to think about, hey, I want to make sure they're getting the nutrition that they need throughout their day, and that's going to happen at Bubbles and Blocks Child Development Center. Much like recruits value stability, so do parents, and so does Bubbles and Blocks, where its management team has been in place since 2019, with some of them having even started when the daycare opened in 2013. Spots are open at all 3 centers. Get your child enrolled today. Give them a call at 402-328-0404 or shoot an email to info@bubblesandblocks.com. All right, Tim. So I told you just seconds ago before we started the show, because I'm famously very good at giving you a ton of notice about what we're going to do, that I wanted to talk about, some of the early spring visitors. Now, what I mean by that, and not everybody is aware of this, but the calendar, unless things have dramatically changed, I'm not going to be aware of it. The calendar has this as a dead period, and so recruits cannot take visits, coaches cannot go on the road. Everything is just shut down. Like February is a no-fly zone, if you would, for recruiting. Now, you can still be on the phone, you can still do the messaging, you're still getting commitments, we're still getting announcement shows. All that stuff is still happening because recruiting never stops, regardless of whether recruits can be on campus or not. But Tim, I believe this is correct, but things open up March 1. Effectively, the calendar starts over. Now, official visits cannot happen until April.
Yes.
Is that correct? Yeah. So
yes.
March is going to be a month of unofficial visits, and Nebraska, under this staff especially, likes to have visits for their spring game. Of course, that'll be March 28th, but also the practices leading up for it. They have done, in my opinion, a terrific job getting people to come out for practices, to get to watch them in a little bit more of a laid back environment, but an environment where they can see what their future position coach is acting like, what is expected of them in a collegiate practice. I think they have done some real damage in the past, Tim, with getting visitors in for spring practices, maybe even more so the practice setting than certainly the red-white game when that was, a much bigger thing. I just think there's an element of this that you get to see more, and you get to spend more time with the coaches if you're able to get to one of these practices, especially if you're an out-of-state guy. This is like I would argue you might get more out of this than you would an actual game day in the fall.
Yeah, and we mentioned it at the end of Jan when we were talking about, the junior day and how I was like, it feels like the staff's kind of pivoting to emphasizing these practices, which they have done in the past, but a lot of those late junior days is like, you know what, if you can't make it, that's fine. Like get up here in March, get up here at some point in March because you want to get to it. It's like you mentioned, it's not just the fact that okay, let's go into a spring game, for example, like a spring game weekend. Guys arrive Friday evening. They spend time around the coaching staff, and they're at the game. They get a little pregame time with the coaching staff. A couple members of the staff. They probably spend some time with some of the recruiting assistants during that time. And then the game happens, and during that time, it's a couple hours where they're just kind of watching things as they happen. They maybe are interacting with other recruits. Maybe there's a recruiting assistant or two in the stands with them to answer questions or help them around or whatever. But it's really not until the end of the game and stuff that they're able to talk. And for some of the guys, especially the guys in the region, they usually just head home. So compare that to, let's say, a practice visit. Let's say, a lot of guys are already planning to be there on March 5th, for example. get on campus. They don't practice in the afternoon, so you get the whole morning with the coaching staff. You get to hear about them, walk through the facilities, get the full kind of morning with them, and then practice starts. And then you're out there. Let's say you're David Fuller-Runshoe, one of the top defensive linemen in the country, and you're on at Nebraska for the first time. You'll go and you'll watch warm-ups, and you'll mainly hang around Corey Brown. And the difference between this and the spring game, Corey Brown can't go up from the field up to the stands and be like, "Hey, you saw what we just did that right there?" Like that's he can't do that. But
I mean, he could. It's maybe not the best idea, but
But in practice, Corey Brown can just be right there. David Fuller-Runshoe can be feet, if not right next to him, watching practice, watching the defensive line go at it. And the whole time they're building that relationship. He's seeing what it'd be like if he was at Nebraska, developing in Nebraska's scheme. Rob Orich can come over and add his say. Roy Manning will most certainly be involved. Dave Tollefson, who's working with the D-line, can get involved there. So it just gives you an opportunity to really get to know these guys. And for even let's say a guy like David Fuller-Runshoe who's never visited Nebraska before, it's a crash course. Nebraska wants these guys to make multiple visits, but if they know, like for a guy like David Fuller-Runshoe, this is their only shot to earn an official visit, a return official visit. This is how you check off a bunch of boxes in 12 hours or so.
yeah, and I mean that's part of it too, because we so often think about it from the process of, it's an interview of Nebraska and this recruit where they're, going to come to Nebraska and they're going to see if it's a good fit for them. Sometimes it's the other side of it too, where you get the recruit that comes in for a visit and an unofficial visit like this, and Nebraska is able to get eyes on them for maybe the first time in person and see if they are actually 6'3", or if that hair is doing some of the heavy lifting to get to 6'3", or whatever else. And then a little less so than the official visits, but you get a chance to see personality, how they might respond to things, ask them questions and see how they talk and think and how they interact there. I mean, I don't know that you always have as much time to do this, Tim, but I love talking with guys after they would take unofficial visits, and they get an opportunity to sit down with the position coaches, and they would basically they put my film up on the screen, and we'd be like going through some of what I did last year, and they'd either be getting pointers or sort of be asked to explain, well, why did you do this and why did you do that? That's one of the things that this staff I think does really well, is they tailor some of these visits, especially the bigger guys. They tailor some of what their experience is directly to them. So whether they end up at Nebraska or not, they're walking away with something like that. So a important time period here, and I am curious who are some of the names that are there people expected to be here even on, like, say, Saturday on March 1? Do they have a practice on Saturday? I should probably figure that out.
So March 1st is
No,
technically part of the dead period. So second is when things will officially
the
open back
second.
up.
Okay.
Yes.
When does it look like they're first going to have some people on campus?
So I wouldn't be surprised if people pop through early in the week, especially guys within the region. But really,
Local,
you're
yeah.
looking
Like a
at
Barrett
you're
Cottrell,
looking
you
at
could see.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. But like starting March 5th is really when we're expecting like a big group. And honestly, this first weekend of March, so the first true weekend of March 5th through the 7th or so, is going to be a pretty big weekend. At least it's shaping up to be. Based on the names we have confirmed so far, the names we're expecting to join them on the list. I mean, the names we have confirmed so far. So we mentioned David Fuller-Runshoe. That's a guy who, in the latest On3 rankings, just exploded up from unranked to the number 13 player in the country, number 2 defensive lineman. I imagine when 24/7's ranking gets updated, he's a 4-star and one of the top defensive linemen in the country there as well. 6'4", 280. The tape is unbelievable. The junior tape is unbelievable. Like, for that size, the motor he plays with, I believe it's him. I'm trying to remember. I believe it's him. There's a clip like midway through his practice fail or midway through his junior season. He's like a gunner on special teams, like at 6'4", 280, just hauling downfield. So really impressive mover. And one of these, like, Nebraska's looking for guys from the interior that can shed blocks and get upfield in a hurry. He's every bit of that guy. And so he's actually going to be on campus for a multi-day visit. He's arriving on campus on the 5th and he'll stay through the 7th. I'm not sure exactly when, but it's going to be about a 36-hour visit for him, or 48-hour visit for him. And then you have on Saturday, at least it's expected, So starting Friday into the weekend, Albert Simeon, 5-star offensive lineman, number 2 interior offensive lineman in the country, has visited Nebraska before. Nebraska's battling LSU and Texas A&M there. Texas A&M is really the school to beat at this point. Nebraska fell a little bit amidst the coaching transition. I remember texting with him a little bit in January. He mentioned communication had dropped off just a little bit, but the coaching staff went back to see him. Matt Rule stopped by to see him late last month, and you also had Jeep Wade stop by to see him. So he's building that relationship again with the staff. He's loved his time around Nebraska so far. But
this has to be the third visit for him, fourth visit?
Third or fourth, because he was on campus.
He camped, and he was here for the huddle event, right? So he was here last June for that, and I think he camped. And then he
camped at the end of that weekend. Yes.
And he came to a game.
This is visit number 3. Yeah, this is visit number 3 for him. So, yeah, like a big deal. We talked about, like, for Nebraska, it's like they want these guys to get on campus 3-4 times. They believe that's the key to landing commitments. For a guy out of Louisiana, I mean, you already know at this point he's open to going out of state because A&M is the program to beat. It's a really important spring for Nebraska in that recruitment because they're trying to again, kind of just battle A&M here and try and fend off LSU. LSU's really making a push. They want to keep him home. Again, at this point, I would say A&M's a school to beat, but Nebraska's made this very interesting to this point. Ultimately, I think it's going to depend on how well he gels with Jeep Wade, how well this first visit goes and how he gets around, or this next visit goes when he gets around the offensive line and sees what they're working with. Because there's a lot that Nebraska's checked off a lot of boxes here, but the coaching changes, some of the different things they're doing offensively, I think he just wants to get a feel for all of that. So really important visit for him. You have Quentin Burrell, 4-star wide receiver, one of the top receivers in the country, out of Mount Carmel in Chicago, on campus for the very first time. Nebraska's in that top group, but they're on the bottom end of that. They've got some ground to make up. This is primarily like a Notre Dame Michigan battle. But I wouldn't discount Nebraska here just because of the Trey Taylor effect. Again,
I was going to ask how big, they've
got a relationship.
Is Claude and Puma, right?
Yes, former teammates Claude and Puma. Nebraska's also after Tavares Harrington, his teammate on the defensive side of the ball, 4-star safety in the 27 cycle. So, with Burrell, you have some work to do, but that's what these visits are for. Again, he's going to get around DeKeel Shorts and that offensive staff for the first time. This is the feeling out visit. And so this is one where you're really hoping his time on campus, whether it's 12 hours, 24, 48, whatever it ends up looking like, his time around campus is impactful enough that Nebraska's positions themselves to get him back for an official visit. Then you have Brandon Lockley Jr., 4-star linebacker from Pennsylvania out of St. Joe's Prep. I was texting back and forth with him, and I accidentally called him Josiah just because over the years I've gotten so used to when we talk about St. Joe's linebackers, just talking about the Trotter brothers. Jeremiah was the first one. I covered him back in the day, and then I covered Josiah, who's now at Missouri and headed off to the draft. And I was like, man, I'm sorry. Like, I'm just so used. It's second nature. But St. Joe's, they produce linebackers. Lockley's the next one. Top 10 was a top 10 linebacker in per on 3. One of these top linebackers in the country, 6'1", 220, I believe, is the weight. Yeah, 6'1", 220. Has visited Nebraska before, was on campus for a game in the fall. So this is going to be a return visit for him. This is one where, Nebraska's, I think, well positioned for an OV here, but I think the next visit could be the one. He's kind of gives me that read where, I do think he wants to make official visits. Oregon's in the mix. Bama's in the mix. He's locked into official visits to those schools. Duke's in the mix. But he likes a lot of what he's heard from Nebraska. In Nebraska's ties to Pennsylvania and the Northeast have done a lot of work there too. And I think really the effort Nebraska put in while there was all this turnover at Penn State saw Nebraska surge. And I think they enter the spring as a front runner, and I think they have a chance to put this get this done here this month. And then 2 more, at least at this point, that we're expecting on campus here this next weekend.
Very big weekend, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know. And so we're expecting Waylon Wooten back on campus. He visited for the first time on junior day, 6'1", 315, a 3-star, but I really wouldn't shrug at that. This is a guy who's got Florida, Auburn, Georgia Tech, the likes of those programs in the mix for him. But Nebraska really made a move with his first visit last month. He called it a one-of-one experience, got around Corey Brown, really likes the coaching staff. Again, from a size and play style standpoint, you can see some similarities to the guys Nebraska's added. Owen Studmeyer. I would even say there's some shoot, why am I blanking on the name? Dylan Berriman in there too. Just a bigger, squattier, 6'1", of course, but on the north end of 300, carries it really well. A guy who at 6'1", 315, you go back and cut on the high school tape, he's playing some defensive end. So he's quick. He's got some athleticism to him. And yeah, like this is one where another visit, you're well positioned for another good visit. You're well positioned for an official visit. And the last one we have confirmed for this next weekend's Caden Howard, three-star receiver out of Miami Palmetto. That rings a bell. That's where Ja'Cory Barney's from. He's friends with Ja'Cory Barney. He's grown up with Ja'Cory Barney. Also grew up with Cortez Mills, so he's really close with those two guys. Told me Nebraska was his like dream school of sorts, pretty much from a young age, from the success Nebraska had pulling guys out of Palmetto. Before it was Ja'Cory, it was Dwight Boodle, and they've had some success at that program in South Florida. And he's a guy you turn on the tape too. There's a lot of similarities to Ja'Cory Barney. The staff has made that comparison. I have an early prediction for Nebraska because he told me, he just really likes Nebraska's he's already heard, he's never visited before, but he's heard a lot from Ja'Cory, Cortez Mills and those guys about the program. Again, this is one, it's going to be the first visit. And then he's going to make an OV in the summer. I have an early prediction in. I think Nebraska gets this done. I think they're looking for that next Ja'Cory Barney. This is another quick receiver from South Florida that can play out of the slot, but has some value in the return game. 5'10", measured in right around 155 pounds last week at the Under Armour camp, but put down a 4.4, like a laser 4.4, runs 10.7 in the 100-meter. Told me he runs 10.5 in practice right now. He's aiming to put up a 10.5 or better by the end of the season. So quick, we've got verified track speed here. One of those guys, you could see potentially being in this class and I think they take two or three or four receivers. I think you can see him in the class as your slot return guy this cycle.
Wow. That seems like a really good thing to have Ja'Cory Barney be someone you're familiar with because, and I don't know that you can really overstate this, Ja'Cory Barney loves Nebraska. Like he just genuine enthusiasm for everything about this place. I think he would had ample opportunities to be somewhere else. He would be somewhere else if he wanted to be. I continue to think that there is a big season around the corner for him. And so if you've got a guy that is drawing some comparisons there, certainly one that you want to keep an eye on in Caden Howard. So I know this from just poking around over at Inside Nebraska. You're keeping a close eye on Caden Howard and on a few other things potentially. Nebraska hasn't had a commitment in a little bit in its 2027 class, but things could maybe be picking up with some of these visits that are starting here in March.
Yeah, so I also put in a prediction for Barrett Cottrell, in-state offensive lineman. We talked about, again, someone that could pop in potentially early this week. Last I texted with him, he said he's working on a date to get up to Nebraska. Listen, he's a legacy prospect. His older brother played at Nebraska. His dad played at Nebraska. He's visited before, was back on campus for junior day. The staff sees him as a kind of athletic interior prospect. He also plays basketball, an athletic interior prospect that could play guard, could play center. You've heard what Jeep Wade said about that. He wants to bring in centers that play center, not just necessarily develop centers. So again, you're looking at an athletic guard. I would say the thing to keep in mind when you're looking at Nebraska's O-line class, I'm expecting them to take maybe like 5 to 6 offensive linemen a cycle. Like I'm expecting it to be a big class, and
It seems like a big high school class on top of this.
I think it is going to be a big high school class. Like
because they've been kind of small the last couple of cycles.
Right, and the amount of names they're in on, and I think there's a shifting strategy. I don't think Nebraska's going to go out here and do what USC did last year, where they took like 40 high school or 36 high school kids. Like I don't think that's in the cards necessarily, but this is going to be a bigger class, and I think some of these positions, like offensive line, defensive line, they're really wanting to load up. And so when you look at the in-state guys, Barrett Cottrell and Matt Erickson, I would see that as the floor of this class. And if you see it as that, I don't think how you can really be mad. Like if you establish those guys, get those guys, you already have Erickson committed. Ideally, if you get Cottrell committed here early, you have a good basis to build off of as you approach these next couple of months into official visit season and figure out how you want to build on top of that. Cottrell's a guy, again, an interior guy. He's going to need some time to add weight to his frame to adjust to the physicality of the Big Ten and take the jump up from Ashland Greenwood up to Big Ten football. But you can see, I don't think with him and Erickson, I don't think the tape is you don't fall in love with the tape, but looking at both of those guys, there's enough athletic traits, and I think there's enough traits overall where with some polishing, with an established developer like Jeep Wade in charge of those guys' development, you don't really have to squint to see what those guys could look like in 3, 4 years.
Is it a thing sometimes where when you've got guys that are the size of Erickson and the size of Cottrell, and you know that they have other opportunities elsewhere, that if you're gonna take sort of a lottery ticket on an in-state kid, you maybe do it on somebody with just sheer size like this?
Yeah, like I mean, even with Cottrell too, it's like okay, with Erickson, it's like okay, I mean, the pure size and the athletic traits, it's like okay, well, sometimes I don't love his hand punch. Sometimes I don't love the way he like the I don't love the body strength. Sometimes there's things when I'm watching him, I'm like okay, I don't love it, but in terms of like the clay you have to work with, there's a lot there. You can't find that, like what Matt Erickson has too. And on top of just the size and the athleticism, it's like, okay, for his size, he's got skinny ankles and thick calves and like he's muscled up. He's got a good frame that you can continue adding weight to. With Cottrell, it's a lot of the athletic markers. He's 6'4", 270. Also plays basketball, so he's
Mhm.
agile. He's got some ability to him. He's a very functional mover. He's also a track kid. I mean, or like competes in field events and has some good testing times. Good has had some good showings there. So you have some verified strength metrics there too, and explosiveness metrics there too. I think all of that combined, again, the tape you might not fall in love with it. Like there's a stark difference between like Barrett Cottrell's tape and Albert Simeon's tape. But the athletic traits with Cottrell, you can understand why Nebraska likes him, offered him, why Iowa's offered him, why Kansas State's in the mix, Minnesota just offered, and why I think Nebraska's working fast to keep this guy in state.
Yeah. It's funny you say that with Simeon because I think there's probably a difference between his tape and like 100 different
Yes. Oh
offensive
yeah.
linemen that are gonna be recruited. I mean, that's why he's been identified. It's why Nebraska's going as hard as he is, and that's why winning those guys really matters. And then it's not just winning them; it's maximizing when you have them on campus, and that's been the next step that Nebraska needs to get to. You might have mentioned it, and I might have just missed it, so I apologize if you're recovering ground. But is there plans for Trey Taylor to be amongst these guys here that weekend, that first weekend of March?
Yeah, expecting it. I'm not 100% sure on the first weekend of March, but expecting him on campus a couple times here this month.
Yep.
Again, as Nebraska's kind of building this out, and as we're getting closer to this next month, yeah, again, that fifth through seventh weekend is looking like the big featured weekend for them. In addition to the spring game, and so I think both of those weekends will be the ones where you're going to want to have your like ace peer recruiter in town. So yeah, I mean, at this point, I haven't confirmed it, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Trey's on campus next week.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Any other names you want to touch on? Any other news recruiting wise before we shift gears a little bit here?
I mean, I guess one other name, I'm going to put up the story here later today, but MJ Evans, Marquise Evans, out of Alabama, in just coming off his second year playing football, but 6'5", 235, 245-ish, defensive end. It's primarily an SEC battle, Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, South Carolina, so on and so forth involved. Texas just got involved. Nebraska offered in September. There hasn't been much between the two programs, at least on the record. I've exchanged some text with him. He's another that I would look to pop on campus next week for the first time. And one, as Nebraska is building this out, I mean, I'm writing up my edge board or Nebraska's edge board right now, where things kind of stand. A lot of different names coming on and off that list. Abe Sese just announced his top schools. That was a guy Nebraska really wanted, got on campus, even went out and visited him last month. They didn't make the cut. So that was a bit of a shock for them. And so where do they pivot from here? Evans is going to be a guy I'm going to keep a close eye on, especially if he makes it up to campus next week.
Yeah, absolutely. So Josh Peterson and I were discussing yesterday players that we're excited about that are returning for college football. And I was telling him how I've had this infatuation with Nate Frazier since he sort of was a target of Nebraska's back in what is that, spring of 24. He came on campus a couple times. I cannot remember the offensive lineman teammate that he played with that they
Oh,
visited a couple
Baker,
times. Yeah, it's
Brittany
Brandon
Baker.
Baker. Brandon
Yes.
Baker. Okay, there we go. I knew it was a double B, and I kept wanting to say Bolden, and I knew it wasn't Bolden, and I could not come up with the other name. And I was too lazy to look it up because why would I use the internet when it's at my disposal when I could just cry about it and then have someone else answer it for me? But I loved Nate Frazier's just overall speed, athleticism. I like watching his film. I like looking at just watching him play. And so I am curious, is there anybody in this 2027 class where you have like a film crush on at this point? Because I know you love watching the film. I know that
Oh,
you watch a lot of film. And so there's probably no shortage of people that you could answer. But is there somebody's where you're like, man, I really like putting this on? Like this guy, I get excited when I have this film on. It doesn't even have to be someone that's like a tried and true Nebraska's definitely going to get a visit for a target. I mean, if there's someone that you just want to highlight, this guy's got some good film. I think people would be interested in that.
yeah, I think especially recently, the film I really fell in love with, Malik. I've been going through some of the new D line offers. The two guys that I've watched again and again since, Malik Lee, out of Sarasota, Booker down in Florida. The first clip I've tweeted this out, but the first clip on his tape is this like 75 plus yard interception where he just kind of brings the ball down at the line of scrimmage and then shoves the quarterback into the ground. And then he's moving in space, like doesn't look like a 6'3", 270-pounder in space. You see him start to separate at the end of it. And then he's just like running through tackles by the end of it. Like guys are diving at his feet, trying to trip him up. And he's just diving through it. And then from there, it's just dominant tape. And then the other one is David Hill. Like the three-star defensive lineman out of Homeward Flossmoor, on the south side of Chicago, like a guy that I believe it's the south side of Chicago. McMaster's going to get at me if I mess that up. But a
He will.
guy
He'll get
that
after you either way.
but stands 6'3", like right around 300 pounds. But man, I'm a huge fan of. I think this started for me when I was covering Michigan. In the year Kenneth Grant signed, I was on the beat. And I remember just being like hammering the table. Me and EJ, like, look, like at the time we were telling on through, he was like, look, I know he's a 3-star. I know guys haven't gotten eyes on him. Kenneth Grant needs to be a 4-star. Like, we need to get this guy bumped up. And yeah, he's a first round pick. Like for good reason was eventually a 4-star. But I remember turning on Kenneth Grant's tape and just falling in love with guys that size with that agility, and they don't pop around very very often, but I'm always enamored with guys like that. David Hill, he's not that big. Again, he's 300, he's not 320, 330, but moves around just like that, like is a true like run stuffer. And I love that in high school. You see a lot of guys at the high school level too, especially when they play at some of these smaller programs or their technique isn't really defined or any of that. They love the counting stats. They love to get after the quarterback and are just solely about that. So I love these guys who take pride in run defense and stuffing the run and getting to the line of scrimmage and that and D linemen too that pursue guys downhill. So for me, it started with Kenneth Grant, and then I covered DJ Sanders, who's now at Texas A&M out of Belleville. Emmanuel Sanders' cousin, who is much bigger than Emmanuel Sanders, 3 inches taller, about 100 pounds heavier. I watched DJ Sanders once. A snap went over. He was in like the shade tech, like head up on the center. The snap goes over the quarterback's head. He beats the quarterback to the ball. Like just an unreal athlete. Just working from again that defensive tackle position, beating the center and the quarterback to the ball. But I got shades of those two guys when I was watching David Hill. And again, I don't think he's both those guys have about 10 to 15 plus pounds on him, but Hill is one of those like dancing bear types, remarkably nimble interior defenders who's going to be able to carry like 310 to 315 pounds, if not more, at the next level really well and stuff the run from the interior. I love that guy. I'm a huge fan. I think that's my guy in this cycle that I've really fallen in love with as of late.
What's his recruitment sort of looking like? How involved is Nebraska at this point?
Nebraska have offered. They're working to get him on campus. Really wouldn't be surprised if he pops on campus this spring. It's one where David Fuller-Runchu exploded. I wouldn't be surprised if Hill's the next one when we're like as the country kind of scours for these interior defenders that move really well because he does. And he's got a lot of the Big Ten interest. The Big Ten programs you want are in there: Iowa, Michigan State. I know Michigan's monitoring, Notre Dame's monitoring. Really, I think it's going to be how big does this recruitment get? Like if Notre Dame offers, that's going to be a game-changing recruitment or a game-changing offer for him. Michigan enters the mix, that's going to be a difference-making offer for him. But right now, I think Nebraska's near the top of the schools that are in there. But I think he's still getting a feel for it. We'll have a better idea of where things stand once he makes some visits.
This sort of makes me wonder. Have you ever taken like players that clearly would have been in high school probably before you were in high school or graduated high school before you were in high school? Like, have you ever just gone back and looked at the high school film of random players that are now in the NFL or random Nebraska guys or anything of that nature?
Yeah, I like to. I like to now. When I was interning with Huddle, part of my job was pick like every for each draft or each like big event, we'd find like high school tape of those guys and put them out, or like put together like a cut up of clips. So my job was like there were days where, especially during the summer, where I just cut up like all these old, like we knew the NFL was announcing the all decade team because it was 2020. Knew the NFL was going to announce the all decade team or whatever. So we went back and like cut up tape on those guys. And then we cut up tape on guys in the draft. And so that was really fun to get to see all of that. I think the high school tape, I'm trying to remember if the one that sticks off. The thing that I gathered from that was a lot of high school or a lot of really good NFL players are also really good basketball players, at least in high school, which tracks. But it really taught me a lot at the time of like, look, if you don't have to squint to see it in high school, typically it's going to work out. Like if the guy just looks different in high school,
Mm-hmm.
more often than not, that's going to look like it's going to work out. Like even if there's limitations, like you remember, like with DK Metcalf coming out of college, it was like, oh well, he's kind of only a straight line speed guy. And he's kind of only this, he's kind of only that, and then but you go back and like watch high school and college, and obviously look what he's doing in the NFL now. But like he's kind of always been the same guy, and if you can win like that just naturally, like and you could test the way he tests and move the way he does, like yeah, you'll be fine.
You
And
figure it
so
out, right? Like,
yeah, you figure it out. But
yeah.
seeing DK look like that in high school against like I think he was at Starkville High School too. Like it was a whole thing that he went from Starkville or Oxford. I think it was just Oxford. Yeah, it wasn't Starkville. But
Yeah.
regardless, he's like against like he wasn't at like Atlanta. It wasn't like a big powerhouse program where he's playing against top competition. I mean, Mississippi has recruits every year, but like it's not like he's facing dudes. But seeing like high school DK Metcalf look like DK Metcalf against high school kids, it just was awful to watch in a good way.
Yeah.
Just I felt bad.
You were talking about David Hill, and it sort of reminded me of there's this period where Nebraska would go into Kansas City and they got, Malik Collins, who's had a nice NFL career since then, and the Davis twins. And it just like you would see these guys and you just know instantly they're going to be good college players. And it's sort of hard to explain because all three of them, and obviously two of them are twins, are going to be physically very similar, but none of them are like 6'5" and impressive because of that or anything. But it's just like you see a suddenness sometimes, whether it's on film or certainly in my case, the Davis twins in person, watching them with Blue Springs. Like there's something about some of these interior defensive linemen that you kind of know it when you see it. Like there's something about the way that they move that doesn't seem natural at the high school level that you know is only going to get better when they have the right technique and they can build out their body a little bit and everything else. And so I would encourage you to just go throw on some Davis twin film, marvel at the random speed that comes from guys that were sprinters at like 6'2", 280 or whatever they were in high school. And then Malik Collins is this guy that like Nebraska knew about. They kind of were going back and forth on. They finally went full bore on him. And lo and behold, like he was just a miss by everybody in the recruiting industry and everything. He was a 3-star, but the only teams that really knew about him were Nebraska and Missouri. And that guy is having a nice long NFL career. And you could tell on his film, and certainly by the first time he shows up at Nebraska, like, okay, this is different. There's a reason that he could just go to the NFL after 3 years. There was nothing left for him to accomplish in college football. And now he's just a veteran mercenary in the NFL that everybody kind of likes having in the interior defensive line because he just does the job. Like there's something about those guys that you sort of see, whether it's film or in person, that maybe it's a little bit harder to see with some of the other positions. I don't know why it is.
Yeah, it's a lot of movements. It's something I've had to adjust to as well, of just like even more so than testing or anything, length, whatever, like if you move well on tape, like more often than not, I'm like, okay, that's going to track. Like if you like, you look at guys and how they move. Like it was why I saw Byron Murphy in high school, and it was just like he's just a violent mover and a
Mm-hmm.
really good mover who plays with exceptionally good leverage. Like the stuff he does and the stuff that makes him so good along the interior is he's able to like drop to that knee when he's taking on double teams and get back up. It's remarkable core and knee strength and just unbelievable flexibility. But he's been doing that stuff since high school and stuff that he's trained on and developed. And when you see that at a young age, it's like, okay, like for me and everyone that saw DeSoto High School um, in college, even the rank, like the guys that did the rank, like I'd be there and I'd be like, look, like I get it. You have to rank this. Him and Shamar Turner run the same defensive line. And when you look at the two, you're like, okay, well, there's the 5-star and there's the 3-star. But you watch the two and you're like, okay, well, the 3-stars consistently outplaying the 5-star, like consistently, just like more impactful snap to snap than the 5-star. And it was like, oh, well, the size, this, that. And it was just like, look, it worked out. He's in the NFL. He just won a Super Bowl.
Yeah. It sure did. It sure did. All right. So here's something that Nebraska fans and Nebraska coaches hope kind of works out. And I know he committed on this show. It might have been like your literal first appearance on Unemployed. Anthony Jones commits during the middle of the show. Very rude
Yes.
on his part to try to usurp what we have going on here. But, it immediately it's like, okay, this guy's been at multiple different schools and he's now the poster child for everything that's wrong with the transfer portal, et cetera, et cetera. I would be kind of surprised if you're a Nebraska fan and you didn't watch him get up and talk and the way that he sort of spoke about Nebraska and you didn't walk away from that like, I'm kind of rooting for this kid. Like there's a lot I think to like with Anthony Jones. And I think there's still a lot left in his football career where he can kind of write the finish here at Nebraska for a program that could use somebody like Anthony Jones that can step in and you're looking to replace and not replace, but just exceed the production of a Deshaun McCullough or find some more consistent production on the edge spot. I think I've talked myself into Anthony Jones a little bit, Tim. And again, it's not that I think he's going to be an all Big Ten performer or that he's Randy Gregory incarnate or, reincarnate or whatever. It's just, I think there's a solid football player in here that Roy Manning and the rest of the staff sort of was like, yeah, let's see what we can do here. He's got connections to guys who have played for Rob Arch and Manning and felt comfortable with it. He obviously he spoke about playing against Nebraska out in Pasadena last year. I it kind of fits. And I think he wasn't someone I put a lot of value in the recruiting cycle or in the portal cycle in January. But now I guess maybe the Kool-Aid sloshing all over the place. And I've talked myself into to him being someone that has more value than I previously thought. Again, doesn't mean he's going to be a star. Doesn't mean we're going to be talking about him every day. Just think that there's more here than I originally thought. And you were on this, to your credit, you were on this, I think, before other people were. So I want to shout you out on that.
I appreciate it. But yeah, so you go back and watch the UCLA tape and you look at what's missing from the tape just in terms of like, okay, well, what's he not doing? What do we want to improve here? And then you listen to Roy Manning talk about what he does well and what, with Rob Orridge talk about what the emphasis is with the edge rusher. It's the top of the rush. It's finishing your passers and getting to the quarterback. Like the critical moment. Do you know when to disengage? Do you know how to arc? Do you know how to close on the quarterback and get there? That's what Roy Manning specializes in. That's also the thing that Anthony Jones really struggled with last year. Not struggled with, but like that's the one thing that's really missing from his tape. Like he's a guy where it's not one for one at all. I won't make this comparison because I don't think they're the same players really, but there's times on this tape where I'm reminded similarly to what I felt about like Prince Will his last season, even Willis McGahee, not last season, but the season before, where it's like, oh, these guys are just a hair away from like closing on a big sack. Like they're right there. They are just a beat off, whatever that looked like, whether it's just a late get off, whether it's fighting through block, whatever that looked like, they're just a bit off. And so for Jones, on top of all of that, he's a pretty sound run defender on the edge. And I think within what Nebraska is going to have to ask their defensive ends to do here, I think he's well capable of executing that. I mean, he looks the part. We got around him yesterday. definitely an eye catcher. One of those guys is like, not necessarily first off the bus because that's going to be Williams and Renari, but the second guy off the bus is going to be Anthony Jones, at defensive end. So I agree in the sense that, okay, yeah, I don't think he might not be a star, but like, I mean, already just the way they're talking about him, he's going to be at the top of the depth chart here at defensive end. They're going to ask him to be on the field a lot, and they're kind of counting on him to be a pretty sound run defender and hope that he develops as a pass rusher and can be one of their guys, maybe opposite, maybe behind, alongside, whatever that looks like, alongside Williams and Renari. That's getting after the quarterback. So he's got some bend to him. I think that's a big thing. Like a couple guys on this roster don't. They're going to have to figure out how to get to the quarterback without being naturally bendy. Jones, to his credit for his size and everything, has some bend. And I'll also say this, this. There's a couple of guys out there that have transferred a bunch. You rarely see a guy that's transferred as much as Anthony Jones, and at no point is that to dip down below Power 4 football. Like, usually at
That's a
some
good
point
point.
along the way, you have to
Yeah.
do it. So there's clearly something here that a bunch of specifically Big Ten programs see in this guy that they're like, well, let's take our shot. Like, we can fix him. We can fix him. And, we talked about him candidly yesterday after, or before he was up on the podium. Me and Justin Frommer were out in the hallway because we were told we could talk to him. So we went and talked to him for a bit. And, he was candid about kind of the spots he's been to, the schools he's like, what he's not like, what he was really looking for here. He's a guy who prioritizes development, has found a system I think that he believes can get the most out of him. And he's really looking to put a lot on tape. I mean, this is his last year. He knows it's his last chance. So I think he's taking this seriously. And he's also a guy at this point, having transferred as much as he is, he's not coming in with any draw. He mentioned that too. Like, something that for Nebraska that's really important is a lot of these transfers settling in. Jones can help because he's been around a bit and he knows. He's like, look, you just kind of got to get in there. Initially, he was like, I put my head down, just went to work, no real fuss. Like, that's just kind of how I have to be. And so, one, he's already kind of leading by example as a veteran defender for a room that is pretty young and still relatively inexperienced. But two, for some of the other transfers too, guys that I mean, Anthony Calandri's kind of stepped in and been a leader because he's transferred before. He knows what this looks like. He was also at UNLV, a team full of mercenaries where they figured out how to get that team together. So it's not guys like him, but like a guy like Quasi Gilmer, who this is his second school. He's only known UCLA. To get around guys, Will Hawthorne, guys that this is their first real transfer experience, helping them become part of the team and figure out this transition because unlike the freshmen, there's no one really there to hold the transfers' hands. Like, they kind of have to get
Mhm.
in and find their place. For the freshmen, it's like, oh, well, you're new, you're young, you're adjusting to life in college in general. You have some support. It's not always there. Nebraska does a good job of making sure there's support there, but it's not always there for transfers in the same capacity because it's kind of just you got to figure it out, bud. Like, we brought you in to do some work. You're not like a freshman who we're just developing or whatever. Like, we brought you in to do something. You got to figure it out. So Jones having transferred a good bit actually does kind of provide him some good experience and provide, gives this room some good leadership.
Yeah, it's interesting. The thing that I guess that I was dancing around that I couldn't come to until you were talking, there's a maturity there that I just sort of assumed wasn't because he transferred so
Yes.
many times. Like, and
Right.
that's on me. Like, that's sort of bringing my own preconceived notion of what a guy who's transferred that much must be like, because clearly the assumption I have is, well, he doesn't fit at these other schools. But you make a really good point, and some of it is just fierce, the sheer size. Like, guys like that are going to get more chances because he looks the way that he does. Like,
Yes.
that's the reality of it. But when you pair it up with someone who has a sort of maturity to say what he did, and maybe it's just lip service, but I don't. When it's backed up with how Manning talked about him and sort of just what I've heard and how other people have talked about him, it makes me feel better that there's something to this. And again, I don't want to overstate it that he's just going to come in and do this or do that, and he's going to have 7.5 sacks and 18 tackles for a loss, or I don't know. I'm picking numbers at random, but just go with it. Like, I don't know that any of that is going to happen, but could he be a stabilizing force on a defensive line where you kind of need that? Feels like the answer to that is yes, and that feels like that's a pretty good thing for Nebraska overall. Playing off of that, Tim, the other thing I thought came out of yesterday, and I have some other thoughts, but we don't need to dive into all of it. We can kind of wrap up with just sort of this. I thought we got a pretty good indication just from him standing up there and talking why Roy Manning can be an effective recruiter, why someone would want to play for that guy. I liked what he had to say about, the difference between traits and skills. I like what he had to say about, the way that the importance is that, when you get there, wherever you come from, whatever you bring with you, you're checking that because when you go through the door into the meeting room, it's time to work. When you go through you get onto the practice field. So again, like there is an element to this when Nebraska brought in such a young staff and guys that hadn't coached a lot, that one of the things that felt like maybe it was missing and that Tony White kind of had in spades is sort of that elder statesman coach effect. Like you don't really have that when you have Rob Dvorak and you have Evan Cooper and you have Terrence. Like they're all sort of young into their profession. Tony White was not. I think Roy Manning kind of has that, and Corey Brown has that to an extent too. I think that can really help bolster some of what they have with their defensive line and the defense as a whole. I'm making some leaps here, but I think they're based on sort of just a wealth of experience of being in this sport and around this sport.
Yeah, Manning's an interesting one for me just because I wanted to get some feedback from USC and San Diego State before I figured out what he was going to be, because I had an opinion on him based on how some of his previous stops had gone, specifically
Mhm.
like the Oklahoma to USC transition. It wasn't super well, and I think he was still kind of finding his positional home where he fit in. He's coached a bunch of positions along the defensive side of the ball, but I think he's found his niche. Or at least I'm starting to think he's found his niche with defensive ends. Like you getting around him yesterday too, like the way he talks about the position and developing the position. You also on top of what you mentioned, you also like a coach who is outwardly confident in his ability to develop. Like that's something that
Yeah,
just
you want that.
yeah, it doesn't just resonate with the fan base, which I'm sure they're excited about, but
Mhm.
the ones that listen. But I also think that's something where if you go into a living room, that's going to resonate with recruits. Like that's the stuff that for recruits, it's like, look, it's on me if you don't develop. Like I trust myself to develop you. I'm the one that can do this. And I think what helps him too is he's got some body of work from San Diego State where he can be like, well, look at these guys. Look what they did before I got there. Look what they did under my watch. And with this year at Nebraska, the goal is to do that same thing. If there's no real telling from a recruiting side of things what a Williams and Renari breakout season could suddenly do for Nebraska's edge recruiting. Like what Nebraska
I
getting
have
that
thoughts.
five-star. Yes, it could be crazy, but yeah, I think with Manning, they have a guy who's no nonsense. And we're talking about Renari. Yeah, you know him too. Like from a personality, everything standpoint, this is the kind of guy Renari needs. Looking out for him every day and coaching him every day, getting after him. Like that's the kind of personality he needs. Overseeing him to pair with the Jamar Mosey, who he sees kind of as a father figure, role model type. Like that's really important. And then you look down the rest of the room, it's like, okay, well, they had success with the Trey White and the Ryan Henderson. Who could those guys potentially be for Nebraska? Like, who are the guys that look like that? And it's like, Willis McGahee and Jordan Ochoa and some of these guys that, maybe further down the depth chart don't look like traditional defensive ends, are going to be more of your stand-up type guys. This season for Nebraska, as I've weighed on the defense, look, Corey Brown's impact's going to be big. I think the ceiling of this team and this defense is going to be what does Roy Manning get out of his room, or
Yeah.
dependent on
No,
what Roy Manning gets out of his room.
I think that's a very valid way to look at it. I mean, I don't think it's a huge secret that there's couple position rooms in general that are going to have a huge impact on how you feel about this team, how this team looks on the football field, and ultimately what the ceiling is and how many games. And on both sides of the trenches, it's the defensive line and the offensive line. If that comes together, if the Corey Brown, Roy Manning, and Lonnie Teasley, Jeep Wade combination can successfully have Nebraska playing at a high level in the trenches on both sides of the ball, the ceiling goes up for this team. almost exponentially. Now, there's still a lot of other things that have to come together, but it certainly would be a big step. All right, Tim, anything you want to plug? Any work out there? Anything you have coming up? Anything that you want to give a shout out or direct the people to?
Yeah, so the edge board will be out either later today or tomorrow, just depending on once I get some of these final text backs and get this thing out. It's a room. It's going to be a room. I'm going to be very fascinated to see how it changes and develops. I would implore you all to check that out too, just because they're in on some big names, but you, Roy Manning, the staff, they still pride themselves on evaluation. They have a few sleepers in that they feel confident about. So just check that out. A couple names in there that may surprise you. A couple of missions from there that may surprise you. Besides that, we're going to wrap up with the D line board over the weekend as well. So stay tuned for that. And then besides that, we'll be back at it next week with recruiting visits. So don't be surprised if you see a recruit or two pop through early next week, if not more. And then next weekend we'll have our first big visit weekend or second big visit weekend of the year.
What I'm excited about is you went through all of these names, and then we're going to have another show next Thursday, and there's going to be even new names to add to that list, because that's how this works, and it's going to be a ton of fun. And Tim is the guy you want to follow in this business. Go check out his work at Inside Nebraska and everything he does there. We appreciate you spending your time with us here on the Unemployed podcast. I'll be back on Friday with Jack Mitchell. It'll be a feedback Friday. If you got questions, get them in at unemployedi80@gmail.com. It's a good time. If you got questions, whatever you want to get to, you got basketball questions, you got football questions, whatever. If you just have questions for Jack Mitchell where you want him to weigh in on things in your life, he would be happy to do that. That is a man that does not lack opinion. So we will have a good show on Friday. Tim will be back for another Building Blocks Thursday next week. We are back to visitors being on campus. Tim's life is back to being hectic. He got to enjoy the shortest month of the year where not as much could be going on. And I'm sure, Tim, you were still plenty busy. So, all right, everybody. We'll catch you again tomorrow. Have a good one.